Well, hello there, challengees. It's Tuesday, November 28th. This is the Always Better Challenge Show. I'm Joe Bedford, your host. The Always Better Challenge Show, the show that helps you take steps today that lead to being better and happier tomorrow. The title of today's show is Carpe Tempore. You Latin fans might enjoy that one. I think everyone is familiar with Carpe Diem, seize the day, and Carpe Noctem, seize the night. Carpe Tempore means seize the time. And today's show is going to be all about, I was going to tell you what it's about, but I'm going to do my quote first, and then I'm going to tell you what it's about, because the quote kind of tells you what it's about. So today's quote for the show is, "Don't say you don't have enough time. You have exactly the same number of hours per day that were given to Helen Keller, Pasteur, Michelangelo, Mother Teresa, Leonardo da Vinci, Thomas Jefferson, and Albert Einstein." And that quote comes to us from H. Jackson Brown. So yes, today's show is going to be all about time management, the importance of time management, the benefits of time management, some tips, tools, techniques, and tricks as always on time management. We're also going to address some, I'm going to call them questions or comments that were brought up in the Facebook group. I'm really optimistic that this is going to be one of the most helpful, maybe the most helpful episodes yet. I really hope so. I'm basing that on the fact that the comments that I've gotten in the Facebook group have all revolved around, as far as something that folks are struggling with, they do seem to be issues of time and time management. So I'm very optimistic and hopeful that I can provide some value to you in today's show that's really going to help you make tomorrow better, which is always our goal here on the Always Better Challenge Show. So time management. Why is time management so important? That was a longer drink than normal. I apologize. Drinking water today from my Vols cup. We're not going to, Vol for life. That's all I can say. So time management is so important because time is the one thing you cannot create more of and that you cannot get back once it's spent. We can always, hopefully, make more money and sometimes get money back. But once time is burnt, it's burnt. And you can't make more of it. As the quote at the beginning of the show said, we all have the same amount. The richest, most powerful person in the world has the same amount of time as all of us. There's no, and actually, I maybe should have had this in my notes about buying time. I mean it just occurred to me that's one thing I didn't have in there. I guess we'll talk about that when we get to A, B, C, D, E, 1, 2, 3. So that'll make sense when we get to that later on. One thing you can't create or get back. So it is so important to resolve to proactively master your time. Make your time serve you. Make the most out of your time that you can. This gives you control. This puts you in control. This gives you the feeling of control, the feeling that you're master of your own destiny when you really take the steps to take control of your time. And those steps are very doable. It's just a matter of using tools, techniques, a little discipline. It's very doable. Because you don't want to be the person who lets stuff slip through the cracks. And this is what happens when you don't have a system to manage your time, to manage your commitments, to manage the work that you have to do and the tasks that you have to do. And the way I think about this is that so much of your personal reputation revolves around whether or not you have the reputation as being the type of person who honors their commitments, who follows through on their commitments, who doesn't, "Oh, I forgot," or "Oh, I missed that," or that type of thing. Most folks, when they make commitments, they certainly have the best intentions, but if you don't have systems in place to make sure that the important commitments get done, they can get missed. And once you've got that commitment, that reputation, it's hard to fix. So you want to have the reputation as being the person that follows through and does what they say they're going to do. And good time management can help you with that so much. I could have used this as the quote. I'm sure a lot of you have heard this, but I love this one, and it kind of does say it all, and so I have to throw it in. The 5 Ps. Prior planning prevents poor performance. I've heard slightly different versions of that, but that really is so true. Because if planning, you almost can't plan too much. And I say almost, I mean, yeah, you don't want to spend the entire day planning. I do like to have a set, again, time management, scheduling, a relatively set time frame or time a day to do most of the planning. But you really want to get in depth, and you really want to plan in detail. You don't want to leave so much up to chance, or I'll just wing it. Just winging it is often not a very good strategy. So planning is great, and detailed planning is great. And the thing is that if done properly, the time you spend on planning, because yes, it does take some time, it takes probably more time than a lot of people do take to do really good planning, but you're going to get that time back. That's the whole idea, is that you're going to spend a little time up front to be very much more efficient with your time when you're doing your work and when you're honoring those commitments and getting those tasks done. So that's the goal. You want to make clear, this is really what planning is. You want to make clear decisions in advance about how you're going to spend your time. Now, is this 100% foolproof, watertight? No, of course it's not. Yes, events, there's always fires that pop up, but hopefully with good planning we can minimize those. We can take care of things and plan things before they turn into fires. But yes, of course there's going to be fires. We're always going to have to be flexible as we are going throughout the day and doing our work. But still, the clearer a plan we have, then the quicker we're going to be able to get back on that plan. Even those things might pull us off sometimes. So I said I like to have, again, you want to schedule or plan your planning. The best time for me, and the time that I recommend for doing the majority of your advanced planning, is at the end of your day, whenever that is. At the end of your, let's say, work day. Obviously, I'm not talking about like right before you go to bed, but when you're done doing your tasks for the day. If that means that you're wrapping things up for the evening, where you're going to spend time with family and relaxing and doing whatever, then do it before that. So have that plan for tomorrow. Resolve to do that. Again, that's such a great habit to have. Resolve to do that every day. The habit will reinforce itself, because when you get used to doing that planning at the end of the day, you're going to find the next day goes so much smoother, and you'll find when you don't, it won't. And so that will encourage you to just be disciplined and habitual about planning tomorrow's work out at the end of today. That is a very helpful technique. Probably one of the best tips I can give you. Another segment of planning, or another time that I schedule in planning, is I have found that a weekly review is very helpful. And a good time to do this for me is at the end of the day on Friday. And this takes a little bit longer than maybe planning the day, because this is where I'm doing a little bit of pre-planning for the whole week. This is where I'm also, I don't know to say coming up or backing up a little bit with my perspective, where, getting more of like the 20,000 foot view, for want of a better way of putting it, where, when I'm doing my work throughout the week, I'm so much into tactics and tasks for the most part. Get this done, get this done, get this done, check this off. The weekly review allows me to sort of pull back to that 20,000 foot vantage point and look more more strategically, and look at my projects that I'm trying to move forward, and sort of review, how am I doing on those projects? Where am I stuck on those projects? How can I get unstuck on those projects? What tasks do I need to focus on the next week to move those projects forward? So sort of that, taking it a step back and looking at the bigger picture, I guess, is a good way of putting it, where through the week so often we're down in the weeds, as it were, looking at the trees. We like to take a step back once a week and look at the forest. Very helpful. So all of this planning, the idea behind this is that when we are working, when we do have these tasks and responsibilities that we have to, do, we want to be as efficient as possible. The goal is that we want to be able to do more in less time and with less stress is the nice bonus that I think comes from that, from having a really good plan. So remember that that's the goal. The goal is not necessarily to just, turn into some, blinders on working machine 24 hours a day kind of thing, nose to the grindstone. I mean, although there certainly is a time for that kind of discipline, it's not the idea of we're just going to, do that all the time and run ourselves into the ground. Obviously, that's not going to be beneficial. The idea is to do more in less time so that we're able to make sure that we do the important things. And it also will hopefully give us time to do the what they call deep work nowadays, or that's the phrase I'm hearing a lot recently that I haven't heard in the past. But those projects or those things that take a more thought and strategy and brainstorming and creativity, those kinds of tasks. That's a great benefit of good time management, is enabling yourself to have the time to do those things. Very helpful. So that's the idea, is the efficiency. And all of these things, another nice thing that I think makes them a little bit self-reinforcing is that when you start getting the good results and start seeing the good things that you're able to do, things that maybe had been stuck for a long time, and you're able to move those forward through being more efficient, it also is going to encourage you, I think, or it serves as an incentive to not waste time, because obviously that's a huge part of time management. And so often where the wheels can come off the bus is where we waste time. And, excuse me, I'm gonna try not to point fingers at any particular activity, because I could see that could go down a bad road, where it sounds like I'm criticizing certain things, although there's a couple that just are so obvious that I almost have to say, like watching TV, spending too much time on social media or news sites or sports sites, things like that. Now, I'm not telling you not to have fun. I'm not. But keep that in its place. Don't let that derail you from your bigger vision and your bigger tasks. And I think you know what I mean by that. Let's be honest. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with watching a TV show or checking out Facebook or checking out the sports scores. But how often does that, if you're not being very mindful, how often does that turn into a rabbit hole, a rabbit trail that you go down, and the next thing you know, you look up and you're like, oh my gosh, I just wasted an hour. And, we could argue about totally wasted. Well, I was having fun or entertaining, but I think you would agree that you don't feel really great and productive and like you got so much done if you've spent an hour, looking at Facebook statuses or whatever. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, we want to have fun, but keep it in its place. And we're going to talk a little bit in a moment about how to incorporate things like that during the day as well. We're actually coming to that right quick. So, how about tools that we're going to use to help us in our time management? How do we actually manage our time? What are the tactics? Well, there are, I'm going to say 3 or 4, depending on how you look at it, components, in my opinion, of a time management system. The first and most, I'm going to say arguably most important, right up there with one of the other ones, but maybe another way to say it is the place where you're probably going to spend most of your time is in your to-do list. You always want to have a to-do list, in my opinion, and you always want to work from a list. That right there will make you so much more efficient than trying to do things out of your mind all the time. Write it down, work from a list. So your to-do list. You can use a paper list or an online list. I do, although I admit to having a fondness and a nostalgia for paper, and it certainly has advantages. But for me, the technology and the advantages that it gives trump it. So I do use online tools or computerized tools, technology tools, however you want to put it. They just do so many things that paper can't. For one thing, they can send reminders or alerts or tones and things like that. A piece of paper's just not going to do that. You have to look at it. There are also it's just so much easier to edit things and move things around. I used to use paper back in the day, and there was a lot of crossing out and rewriting things and erasing things, and it just isn't as efficient as the online tools are in that regard. So that's my preference. I'm not going to tell you not to use paper, but that's why I don't. That's why I don't. So you want a to-do list. I'll talk when I get to the resources section of today's show what I use for my to-do list. Well, before I move on with that, I do want to mention the ABCDE 1, 2, 3 method. I teased this earlier in the show. Some of you may have heard of this, and this I've at different times in my life I've used this and not used this. There are some critiques of it in that the tasks that are given a low priority never get done. Well, but that's kind of okay. That's kind of the point, actually. So the ABCDE 1, 2, 3 method. You're going to put your tasks on your to-do list, and you're going to first break them down into one of 5 categories, A, B, C, D, E. Your A tasks are your number 1 priority tasks. These are tasks that if they're not completed, there are going to be serious consequences. Your B tasks are your tasks, I'm going to say, that you should do. These are tasks, they're not as important as the A tasks. There may be consequences if you don't do them, but they won't be as serious or as critical as your A tasks. Your C tasks, these are going to be your could-do tasks or nice-to-do tasks. These are tasks that would be nice to do. There's not really going to be huge consequences, if any consequences, whether you do them or not. Obviously, this is this category of tasks. You're not going to want to spend a lot of time doing these tasks. So that's why it's okay. Like I say, one of the criticisms with this method is that your C tasks don't get done. Well, if there's no consequences, then they really do need to wait until you have nothing better to do than those C tasks. And they may get crossed off eventually, which we're getting to with D and E. The D, your D task, D stands for delegate. This is where these are tasks that you don't necessarily have to do yourself, but you can delegate to someone else. This is where I talked about earlier in the show where it's I guess maybe one of the only ways you can buy time, quote unquote, is that you can delegate it. You can pay someone to do, because this can go with even your household tasks. A lot of folks pay to have their house cleaned. I know because I own a house cleaning service. So that's an example of how you can delegate a task. Or, at work, you can delegate tasks to coworkers, subordinates, higher-ups, whoever you're delegating those tasks to. Or within your family, you can delegate household tasks to different members. E stands for eliminate. These tasks are the tasks you don't need to do. They're just not moving anything forward. They're not moving you closer to any goals that you want to reach. And they're just a waste of time, and they're gone. They're gone. So A, B, C, D, E. And then now the 1, 2, 3. So within all of these categories, you can then further prioritize your tasks by just giving them numbers, just starting at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And this, I guess it would be obvious that then the idea, once you've got all of your tasks delegated like this, categorized with a letter and a number, you then resolve to start with your A1 task, go through your A1 tasks in order, then start with your B1 tasks, go through those in order. If you get all those done, you can go to your C tasks and go through those in order. So this is very helpful to where you're not having to make decisions throughout the day on what do I work on next, what do I work on next. You've pre-planned it, and you can just boom, 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 boom. You want to resolve to never work on a B task when you've got an A task that's not complete. Unless the B task has a time-sensitive element, and in that case, again, depending on whether it's what the consequences are, you might decide to move it to an A task or not. Just put it at the top of your B and have your day planned where you're going to get to that. And obviously never want to work on a C task when you've got A tasks or B tasks undone. That should be simple. So a couple other points before we move on, or tips. My number one tip, and this is something that I've had strong feelings about for quite some time. Don't multitask. There's one tiny exception that I'll talk about, but as a rule, don't multitask. There was a time when multitasking seemed to have a good reputation in the world, where that was a sign that you were a true achiever. You were doing 6 things at once. But I think we now feel, and I think most folks would agree, that the real way to be efficient is to focus single-mindedly on one task, which will enable you to move through it much more quickly and then move to your next task. One thing at a time with laser focus, and then move on. There's a quote, now I'm paraphrasing and I might not say this exactly right, that if you're doing 2 things at once, you're not doing anything, or that you're doing them half. Okay, I'm butchering that quote. Never mind, we'll leave that one. But yeah, multitasking is really, in my opinion, not the best strategy. Now, the one tiny exception, if you're doing something that's mindless, well, maybe I shouldn't say mindless, mostly mindless. Driving the car, while that's certainly something you definitely need to be mindful and be a defensive driver, you can listen to a show like this or something along those lines. That type of multitasking is fine. Or I don't even know if this would count as multitasking. Returning phone calls when you're stuck in line somewhere or something like that. That kind of multitasking, sure, that's great. But trying to do 2 things at once, you're really not giving the attention to either one that they deserve. You're going to make mistakes, and I don't recommend it. You also want to avoid task jumping as much as you can. Jumping from this task and then dropping that, interrupting that to do another task. I understand that's not always possible, but you want to minimize that as much as you can. A technique that we've talked about in previous episodes and related to John Lee Dumas's Mastery Journal, you may remember I talked about. It's the Pomodoro technique. It's a technique where you set aside certain time frames for focused work, and you decide ahead of time what that time is going to be. So if it's going to be 25 minutes, you literally start a timer for 25 minutes. You focus single-mindedly like a bulldog with a bone on that task for those 25 minutes. Don't let anything distract you, or do your best not to. And then at the end of that 25 minutes, you can take a set time frame, 5 minutes or whatever, to refresh. So if that's when you need to check and see what that email was, or if you need to check that Facebook or those sports scores, that would be the time to do that. You have earned it, I suppose, if you've done your 25 minutes of focused work and not allowed those distractions to mess up your 25 minutes of focused work. So I'll give that to you. So now I would like to address some, I'm going to call them questions, maybe concerns is a better way. I had 2 folks in the Facebook group who brought up areas that they struggle with or that they feel like they could do better in, and both of them tied into time management, so I wanted to take a moment to address those. The first comment came from Beth. Beth said that she struggles with finding or making time for herself due to commitments to others. And so this is something that I'm sure a lot of folks can relate to. This is definitely not the first time I've heard somebody say something along these lines. So hopefully, first of all, some of the techniques that we've talked about before are going to be helpful in creating time, not really creating, but carving it out. That may be a better way of putting it. Where we're not wasting time and where we're being more efficient in the things that we do, so that we're able to do those in less time, which gives us more time to do other things. So that's certainly helpful. Scheduling our commitments. If it's truly a commitment, I'm sorry. I just realized I sort of missed something in one of my notes, and this is important. I'm sorry. Let me go back. I talked about the tools that we use. I talked about the to-do list. I didn't talk about the other 3. I apologize. I missed that. A calendar, which everyone knows about, checklists, which are something that I think is underutilized, and a project manager, and that goes to what we talked about with our weekly review, where you've got your main projects listed. So that's the aerial view. But yeah, a calendar and checklists. So a calendar, this is where you schedule your actual commitments. I mean, a commitment meaning I have to be at this place at this time for this thing, or I have to take the kids here at this time, or anything like that. That goes on your calendar. Your checklists, I love checklists, and to me this is like, it feels almost like my little secret weapon, because I don't think a lot of folks use these like I do. I have several, sorry, I hate when that happens, when something comes up on the phone, because then I have to look at it, it drives me crazy. Checklists, I'm going to go quick because I don't want to run over on time here, but I have one for my morning routine, the stuff I have to do every morning. Enables me to get that done so I can get to the main work of the day. An evening checklist, which is not as extensive as the morning checklist, but one of the most important things on that is planning the next day. I also have checklists for things like packing for a trip. That one is invaluable. That makes me so much more efficient and less stressed when I have to pack for a trip, because I've got that, laid out. So I'm sorry, I wanted to go back and make sure that I talked about those when I realized that I had failed to. So yeah, scheduling those commitments, Beth, can help. Freeing up the time in your schedule, being more efficient can help. And, the other part of it, that's just the part where we have to be really mindful and thoughtful, and may have to take some time to think about what's really important to us and what's really not. Do we need to renegotiate some commitments, or do we need to start saying no to some commitments? Have we made commitments that we really don't want to be committed to and that we need to change? Things like, I don't know, the PTA or whatever it is. If there's something that's no longer serving you, obviously this is going to vary for each person, so it's hard for me to give advice, but it just boils down to giving a thoughtful, sober look at what your commitments are. And can any of those be renegotiated or eliminated? I understand some of them can't, or some of them you don't want to, and that's fine. But that is something that you can look at. Again, with the quotes, we almost have to get good at saying no. We can't take on every commitment that anyone asks us to. Just because someone asks us doesn't mean that it's something we can or should or want to do. So we do have to get good at saying no, just very politely saying, hey, thanks for thinking of me for that. I don't think that's something I'm going to be able to do. I appreciate you, bringing it to me, but I think I'm going to have to say no to that particular thing at this time. Because the thing is that, remember that to say yes to the things that you want to say yes to, you're going to have to say no to some other things. We can't do it all. We can't do it all. None of us can do it all. We have to make decisions. Sometimes maybe they're tough decisions, but we have to make them. So another question or comment from the Facebook group, and this was Stephanie, and she, along the same lines, just said that she struggles, finding time. And Stephanie also mentioned something else that's a common thing that folks talk about and strive for, and that's the idea of balance. I feel like I don't have balance. So we've already talked about time. Hey, and I don't want this to sound, but we just have to be honest about this. We can't make time. Nobody can make time, or nobody can. I'm sorry, I'm getting my tongue tied here. Know what I'm trying to say? We can't create time out of thin air. We can only carve time out of the time that we have. So we've got to carve it out. We've got to, as I said, say no to things, schedule things, be more efficient. We've got to make that time. It's not going to appear. It's never going to appear. If you say I'm going to do that when I have time, you'll never do it, because you'll never have time, because you got to make the time. The other thing, as far as balance, I like when folks talk about balance, they talk about like work-life balance and things like that. My gut answer or feeling to that, Stephanie, is to say that I don't know if it's a realistic goal. Maybe to strive for, but we're never going to be in balance. I don't think we're never going to be in balance. As soon as we get in balance, something's going to pull us off. Some commitment at work is going to pull us this way. Some commitment at home is going to pull us this way. I think it's always going to be a dance. I wish I had better news than that. I think it's always going to be a dance. So maybe just the best we can do is to be okay with the dance and to know that sometimes it's going to be off to this side and sometimes it's going to be off to this side, and we're always trying to bring it back to balance. I mean, obviously we always want to bring it back to a place that feels good to us, but sometimes those things are going to get out of balance. And maybe the best we can do is to, again, if there's a secret weapon, it's the planning and doing the best we can to plan and to be efficient and to because that's the thing. Our time is so valuable. Our time is so valuable. So any little bit that we can squeeze out, any wasted time that we can not waste, that's going to help so much. I hope that both of these are helpful answers or helpful in addressing. We live in the real world, so I don't have the perfect answer. And also, I've got viewers. We've got a community. I'd love to hear from you, and I'm sure Beth and Stephanie would as well. What are your thoughts on these subjects? Let's help each other out, because as I'll say a million times, I don't have all the answers. Maybe I don't even have most of the answers, but I know as a group we have lots of answers, so let's do that. So our time is up for today. I do want to really quick mention a couple of resources. I said I would for my to-do list. I use AnyDo. That's found on the web at any.do. There's also an app. It's not a perfect to-do list, but it works for me. It allows you to break things into categories, which, by the way, is how I manage my projects. So it's sort of my project manager and to-do list in one. It allows you to sort by days. You can attach notes to tasks, and you can add subtasks underneath. Very great. For my calendar, I use Google Calendar. A lot of you probably know about Google Calendar. It's a very simple online calendar, very easy to use, easy to edit, and gives you notifications. As far as tools, I recommend the book Getting Things Done by David Allen. I've recommended that in a previous podcast. That literally changed my life in regards to time management when I read that back in the 90s, and it is still very relevant. So my daily challenge, as we always end the show with a daily challenge, the daily challenge is to pick one new time management tool that you are not using and use it. If you're not using a calendar, and it amazes me that some folks don't, gosh, I don't know how you live your lives, try it. It will help. It will really help you manage those time-bound commitments, which are the most important. If you're not using a to-do list, use one, whether it's paper, whether it's AnyDo, whether it's something else. Apple Reminders is another one. Use that if you haven't. If you haven't looked at the 30,000-foot view in projects, look at that. So that is your daily challenge. Use one new tool. That's the end of our show. If you have not subscribed, why is this always my favorite part? I love pointing down there. See that subscribe button? See it right there? I see it. Yep, right there. Click it. Why not? It's free. Won't miss a show. Share the show with someone you think might be interested. Sign up for our daily boost emails, a little punch in the arm for you every single day. That's free, and that's at alwaysbetterchallenge.com. Please keep your suggestions, questions for the show coming. If you have a question you'd like addressed on a future show, comment below, bring it up in the Facebook group, join the Facebook group. We really want to get that going. That's it. So I hope you have a great Tuesday. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Joe Bedford with the Always Better Challenge Show, reminding you to go out there and make it happen.